Aecon Group beat analyst expectations with stronger profit and revenue. Here to break down the company's latest report is Maxim Sytchev, Managing Director of Research and Industrial Products at National Bank Financial. Maxim, thank you as always for joining us.
My pleasure.
A good report.
Yeah, absolutely. Backlog is up 60% year on year, and revenue was better than expectations by 11%, EBITDA by 45%. So, these are good numbers. And as you were talking previously about the very weak tape, it's very nice to see that Aecon's shares are bucking the trend and are up 10% on the day. So definitely a very strong print overall.
Where were they strongest and where were some areas of concern for you?
Yeah, so the whole dynamic is obviously around expectations. So I think the market was imputing potentially some of the legacy projects hitting the bottom line, which did not transpire. So that removed a question of uncertainty when it comes to profitability. And the other dynamic is just the sheer amount of revenue growth really driven by nuclear, utilities, and civil work. So it's really a combination of strong top line without any kind of negative surprises. I mean, that's really what led to much better performance.
And some of those projects, is that like the Eglinton Crosstown in Toronto? What else?
Correct. Yeah, so Eglinton, as everybody in Toronto knows, that one is operational. Finch LRT is up and running as well. And so the only legacy project which is remaining, it's Gordie Howe Bridge. And there, a substantial completion on construction is going to take place kind of between now and the first half of 2026. So we're getting very close to mopping up all kind of the legacy issues. But critically, when you look forward, from a composition perspective, I mean, nuclear right now, it's 30% of top line, and we strongly believe it's going to grow materially more on a prospective basis. Utilities is a very strong business for the company, both in Canada and in the US. As you might recall, the company has a JV partnership with Oaktree, and they've been growing this business fairly aggressively and profitably. We haven't even started talking about nation-building projects in Canada. Defense, transit work is still very robust. So I got to be honest. I mean, this is the strongest Aecon setup from an investment thesis perspective. And I mean, I've been covering the name for many years. That I have seen relative to its own history. So the stock is obviously reflecting these positive dynamics, but certainly deservingly so.
And I just want to go back for 1 second on the legacy with the Eglinton, because we obsess about it here in Toronto, but they're also involved in the extension of it. Any concern, or they are involved in it? Any concerns about that right now? Are they handling that one? Are things going smoother than the first half of that project?
Yeah, to be honest, the contract structure for the recent batch of projects has been changed. So relative to kind of P3 fixed price envelopes that were proposed by the governments in the past, right now it's around target margins where it's highly unlikely that the company would end up in a very similar situation. So I think there is less confrontational relationships, number one. And number two, we're also over the hump post-COVID, where it was very difficult to get employees, materials, supplies, etc. So right now, the entire supply chain has just basically normalized, and we expect this to remain so on a prospective basis.
And with your optimism with nuclear and utilities, I imagine a lot of that is data centers.
Yes, so that's data centers. It's more of a U.S. play. In Canada, it's the legacy of population growth, which has we experienced over the last decade. And if you look right now, Ontario is trying to build potentially 10,000 megawatt capacity on a prospective basis in nuclear. And what makes the Aecon thesis so interesting is that the company is completely agnostic when it comes to technology selection. So right now, Aecon is doing all of the refurbishment work at Darlington and Bruce. And so let's say that CANDU is going to be the go-to technology, which we strongly believe that's going to be the case. But nevertheless, they're going to be able to do CANDU-related work, as they're doing right now. They are the only construction company company right now building an SMR technology in Ontario as well for GE Hitachi, and they're also doing some work on SMRs in the US. So as long as nuclear basically is going ahead, Aecon is going to get a piece of that, and so that's what makes the thesis so attractive. And as I mentioned, right now nuclear is 30%, and honestly, I would not be surprised if it drifts to potentially 40% over the next kind of 5 to 7 years. So the upside is still very, very material from our perspective.
And with what's unfolding in the Middle East, any concerns there? Do they have any connections or any worries about that?
No, thankfully, no exposure from that perspective. So it's very much of Canada slash US story, and just also from a positioning perspective, when we chatted last time, there is concerns around the engineering space and how potentially the business model could be disrupted by AI. Construction is being perceived as a safe industry to own, and so not only do you get better execution momentum right now, you also have a huge revenue visibility, but also the fund flow dynamic is helping the valuation parameters. I mean, that's why the multiple has expanded for Aecon. But what's interesting is that relative to US peers, it's still trading between kind of 40 to 50% discount versus the likes of Quanta, Mastec, Primoris, et cetera. So again, we strongly believe there is materially more momentum for Aecon shares on a prospective basis.
All right, and you have it at outperforming. I just looked at a number. It's at its highest level since 1991.
Yeah, and we strongly believe it's going higher. Absolutely.
Okay, we'll wrap it up there. Maxim, thank you as always for joining us.
My pleasure. Take care.
Maxim Sytchev is Managing Director of Research in Industrial Products at National Bank Financial.